When your wife fires you by email at 3 in the morning, you know romance is truly over. I was in my home gym, pounding the heavy bag with the kind of methodical precision that comes from 20 years of building a tech company from nothing. Sweat dripped onto my phone screen as the notification pinged. Your contract terminated effective immediately. Don't come in tomorrow. HR department. The thing about being married to your CEO is that professional courtesy goes out the window pretty fast. I wiped my hands on the towel and scrolled through the message again. No explanation, no meeting. Just a corporate form letter sent to the man who owned 87% of Sollace Corporation's shares. The irony wasn't lost on me. My name is Jared Sollace, and 2 days ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was the chief technology officer of the company I built from scratch in my garage 15 years ago. My wife, Alara, ran operations as CEO while I handled the technical side. We had a system that worked, or so I believed. The second text arrived while I was still staring at the first one. Your brother fits us better than you. In every way. E. Attached was a photo that made my stomach drop. Rick, my younger brother, sitting behind my desk in my office, feet propped up on the mahogany surface I'd picked out myself. He was wearing one of those expensive suits that Alara always insisted looked executive, and holding a coffee mug that read Chief Innovation Officer. I set the phone down carefully on the weight bench and walked to the kitchen. The house felt different somehow, like the air had changed composition. Everything looked the same. The granite countertops Alara had insisted on, the stainless steel appliances that cost more than most people's cars, the family photos arranged just so on the mantelpiece. But something fundamental had shifted. The coffee maker gurgled as I tried to process what I'd just learned. My wife of 12 years had not only fired me from the company I'd built, but she'd replaced me with my own brother. The brother who'd never held a job for more than 6 months. The brother who still asked me for loans to cover his rent. I poured myself a cup and sat at the kitchen island, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call Elara immediately, to demand an explanation. Part of me wanted to drive to the office and confront them both. But a larger part, the part that had learned patience from years of debugging complex code, told me to wait. Information was power, and I clearly didn't have enough of either right now. The front door opened around 7 a.m. Alara walked in wearing her standard power suit, navy blue with sharp shoulders that made her look like she could cut glass. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore to board meetings, and her heels clicked against the hardwood with military precision. "We need to talk," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. I figured. I gestured to the coffee pot. "Want some? Might be the last time I can offer you anything from this kitchen." She ignored the offer and sat across from me at the island. Up close, I could see she'd been awake for hours. Her makeup was perfect, but there were tension lines around her eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. "The board voted unanimously," she said. "Your technical contributions have been valuable, but the company needs fresh leadership in the CTO role." Fresh leadership. I repeated the words slowly. Is that what we're calling Rick now? Rick has innovative ideas about where technology is heading. He understands market trends in ways that Rick can barely operate a smartphone without help. I kept my voice level. Last month he called me because he couldn't figure out how to connect to Wi-Fi at Starbucks. Alara's jaw tightened. He's been studying, taking courses. He has vision. Vision. Another word that tasted strange coming from her mouth. And I suppose this vision extends beyond technology, into other areas of leadership? She had the grace to look uncomfortable for exactly 3 seconds. Our personal relationship and business decisions are separate matters. Are they? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo she'd sent. Because this seems pretty personal to me. I was angry. You've been distant lately, focused only on code and servers while the business side suffered. Rick pays attention to the bigger picture. I almost laughed. The bigger picture. Elara had always been good with corporate speak, but this was exceptional even for her. "How long?" I asked. "How long what?" "Don't play games with me, Alara. How long have you been sleeping with my brother?" She lifted her chin in that defiant way that used to make me think she was strong. Now it just looked petulant. 6 months. 6 months. I did the math quickly. That took us back to the company retreat in Colorado, the one where Rick had shown up unexpectedly as Alara's guest, the one where she'd insisted they needed to discuss business opportunities while I stayed behind to fix a server crash. "And the job?" I asked. Rick proved himself capable of handling complex projects. The board agreed he deserved a chance to contribute at an executive level. "What complex projects?" Rick's biggest accomplishment this year was assembling an IKEA bookshelf without calling me for help. "You're being petty." "I'm being realistic." I stood up and walked to the window overlooking our backyard. The pool was covered for winter, and the deck furniture looked lonely under gray tarps. "Tell me something, Alara. When you were planning this little coup, did you happen to review the shareholder agreement?" "Of course I did. The board has full authority to make personnel decisions." "Personnel decisions, yes, but not ownership decisions." I turned back to face her. "I still own 87% of this company. Rick can sit in my office and play dress-up all he wants, but he can't make any major decisions without my signature." The color drained from her face. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't what? Exercise my legal rights as majority shareholder? Protect the company I built from being run into the ground by someone who thinks JavaScript is a coffee blend? Jared, be reasonable. We can work this out. The company needs stability." "You're right about that." I picked up my phone and started typing. "Which is why I'm filing for divorce and claiming my full shareholder rights. The company will be much more stable once it's not being managed by people who confuse nepotism with merit." "You can't do this. Watch me." I hit send on the text message. 3 simple sentences. Divorce filed, shares claimed, locks changed. Alara's phone buzzed. She read the message, and her face went through several interesting color changes. "The locks?" "I'm changing them this afternoon. This is my house, bought with my money before we were married. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay. Might I suggest Rick's apartment? I hear it's cozy." She stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. "You bastard. You think you can just destroy everything we've built together?" "We didn't build anything together, Alara. I built a company, you managed it, and now you've chosen to manage it with someone else, so you can deal with the consequences. The board will never let you do this. They'll fight you." "Let them try." I walked to the front door and held it open. "You have 30 minutes to pack whatever you need for tonight. After that, the locks change, and you'll need to schedule an appointment through my lawyer." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating. Elara had always been good at math, which made her betrayal even more puzzling. She had to know this moment would come eventually. "This isn't over," she said finally. "No," I agreed. "It's just getting started." After she left, I sat in my kitchen and finished my coffee. The house felt different again, but this time it was a good different, like the air had been cleared of something toxic. I pulled out my laptop and opened the shareholder agreement I'd written 15 years ago. Back then, I'd been paranoid about losing control of my company to investors or partners. I'd built in protections that seemed excessive at the time, but now felt like gifts from my younger, wiser self. Section 12.3 was particularly interesting. Any major executive decision required approval from shareholders holding at least 51% of voting shares. Since I held 87%, that meant nothing happened without my say-so. Section 15.7 was even better. Any conflict of interest involving executive leadership triggered an automatic review process that could suspend decision-making authority pending investigation. I started typing an email to the board of directors. It was going to be a very interesting day at Sollace Corporation. The phone rang while I was crafting the legal notice. Mike Rizzo's name appeared on the screen, and I answered immediately. Mike owned the boxing gym where I worked out, and he'd been my closest friend since college. "Heard about the termination," he said without preamble. "You okay?" "How did you already hear about it?" "Rick was at Murphy's pub last night buying rounds and bragging about his new job. Half the neighborhood knows by now." Of course he was. Rick had never been able to keep his mouth shut about anything, especially when it made him look important. What exactly did he say? That he was taking over as CTO of Sollace Corp. That his sister-in-law finally recognized his potential. That some people are just better suited for leadership than others. Sister-in-law. The euphemism was almost charming in its transparency. Did he mention anything else? Yeah, actually. He said something about how the company was going to pivot towards social media integration and mobile-first development. Apparently he's got big plans for modernizing your outdated systems. I rubbed my forehead. Rick's understanding of technology was roughly equivalent to a medieval peasant's understanding of rocket science. If he tried to implement any kind of major system changes, he'd crash everything within a week. "Mike, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Shoot." "How long have people been talking about Alara and Rick?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Jared." "How long?" "There were rumors after the company retreat. Nothing concrete, just people noticed things. The way they looked at each other. How she started including him in business meetings. How he suddenly had money for expensive clothes and that new car." The new car. A red Mustang convertible that Rick had claimed he'd bought with savings from freelance work. I'd been suspicious at the time, but had given him the benefit of the doubt. My mistake. Why didn't anyone tell me? What were we supposed to say? "Hey, Jared, we think your wife might be cheating with your brother?" You would have asked for proof, and we didn't have any. Just suspicions. He was right, of course. I would have demanded evidence, and without it, I would have dismissed the rumors as jealous gossip. Elara had always been beautiful and successful, which made her a natural target for speculation. "Well, now I have proof," I said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to remind everyone who actually owns this company, and then I'm going to make sure they never forget it." After I hung up with Mike, I spent the next 2 hours crafting a comprehensive legal notice to the board of directors. The document outlined my shareholder rights, detailed the conflict of interest created by Alara's personal relationship with her new hire, and formally triggered the review process that would suspend her authority as CEO pending investigation. I also froze every joint account we shared and activated a clause in the corporate bylaws that required my signature on any expenditure over $10,000. By the time I was finished, Elara would need my permission to order new office supplies. The locksmith arrived at 2 p.m. A cheerful man named Dave, who whistled while he worked and didn't ask any questions about why I needed every lock in the house, changed immediately. I tipped him well and made sure he understood that no one else was authorized to have copies made. At 4 p.m., I sent the legal notice to all 7 members of the board of directors. Then I sat back and waited for the chaos to begin. I didn't have to wait long. My phone started ringing at 4:17 p.m. Linda Voss, the board chairman and one of Alara's strongest supporters, sounded frantic. "Jared, what is this document you sent us?" "It's a formal notification of my intention to exercise my shareholder rights," I said calmly. "Everything is outlined clearly in the attachment. You can't seriously intend to paralyze the company over a personal dispute." "This isn't personal, Linda. This is about corporate governance and conflict of interest. When the CEO hires her romantic partner to a senior executive position without disclosing the relationship, that creates exactly the kind of situation our bylaws were designed to prevent. Alara's personal life is none of our business. It is when it affects her professional judgment. Rick Sollace has no qualifications for the CTO position. His hiring represents either gross incompetence or deliberate favoritism. Either way, it's grounds for review. The board will fight this. The board can try, but I'd recommend reviewing Section 12.3 of the shareholder agreement before you make any hasty decisions." Linda hung up without saying goodbye. 3 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was James Morrison, the board's legal counsel. Jared, we need to discuss this situation rationally. I'm being completely rational, James. I'm protecting my investment from mismanagement. Your wife has done an excellent job as CEO. The company's profits have increased every year under her leadership. My wife has done an adequate job implementing the systems and products I developed, but hiring Rick suggests her judgment is compromised. I won't stand by and watch him destroy what I've built. What do you want? I want Rick removed from his position immediately. I want a full audit of all hiring decisions made in the past 6 months, and I want assurance that future executive appointments will be based on merit, not personal relationships. And if we refuse? Then I'll call an emergency shareholder meeting and remove the entire board. Don't forget who actually owns this company, James. By 6 p.m., I'd received calls from 4 more board members. The message was becoming clear. They were scared. Good. They should be. Elara tried calling at 7 p.m., but I let it go to voicemail. Her message was predictably dramatic. Jared, you're being completely unreasonable. We can work this out if you'll just listen to reason. Call me back. Please. I deleted the message without responding. At 8 p.m., Rick finally called. His voice was shaky, nothing like the confident executive he'd been pretending to be. Jared, man, we need to talk about this. Do we? I thought you were too busy being Chief Innovation Officer to talk to your obsolete older brother. Come on, don't be like that. This whole thing got out of hand. Maybe we can find a way to work together. Work together? I laughed. Rick, you couldn't work together with a team of engineers to change a light bulb. What makes you think you can run a technology company? I've been learning, taking courses online. I understand more than you think. Really? Tell me about our database architecture. Explain our API framework. Hell, just tell me what programming language our core systems are written in. Silence. That's what I thought, I continued. You're not qualified for this job, Rick. You never were. The only reason you got it is because you're sleeping with my wife. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. But here's the thing. I don't actually care about your personal relationship with Alara. What I care about is my company, and I won't let you destroy it through incompetence. So what happens now? Now you resign, quietly, today, and maybe I'll let you keep whatever money Alara has already paid you. And if I don't? Then tomorrow morning I call an emergency board meeting and present a detailed analysis of your qualifications, or lack thereof. How do you think that will go for you? Rick hung up without answering. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back deck, looking out at the covered pool. The evening air was crisp, and the first stars were becoming visible overhead. For the first time in months, I felt completely relaxed. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This isn't over. You'll regret this. I showed the message to my neighbor's security camera just in case, then blocked the number. Probably Rick, trying to sound threatening. It was almost endearing how little he understood about the situation he'd gotten himself into. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Linda Voss called at 7 a.m. to inform me that the board was meeting in emergency session at 9 a.m. to discuss my demands. They're not demands, Linda. They're requirements. I'll see you at 9. You're not invited to this meeting. I'm the majority shareholder. I'm invited to every meeting. Check the bylaws. I arrived at the Sollace Corporation headquarters at 8:45 a.m. The building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel that I'd designed myself, back when I still believed in the future Alara and I were building together. The lobby was filled with employees who looked nervous and confused. Word of the corporate drama had clearly spread. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, I was greeted by the sight of Alara and Rick huddled together near the conference room, speaking in urgent whispers. They looked up when they saw me, and I could see the fear in both their faces. "Morning," I said pleasantly. "Beautiful day for a board meeting, don't you think?" The boardroom at Sollace Corporation had always been my favorite room in the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the long mahogany table could seat 20 people comfortably. I'd chosen every detail personally, from the leather chairs to the abstract paintings on the walls. Now, sitting at that same table across from 7 increasingly uncomfortable board members, I felt like I was seeing the room clearly for the first time. Linda Voss sat at the head of the table, trying to project authority despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. To her right sat James Morrison, the legal counsel, shuffling through papers with the desperate energy of a man looking for loopholes that didn't exist. The other 5 board members, successful business people who'd invested in Sollace Corp during its early growth phase, looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Elara sat at the far end of the table, as far from me as possible. She'd chosen her most conservative business suit, navy blue with minimal jewelry, clearly trying to project professional competence. Rick sat beside her, wearing what was obviously a new suit that probably cost more than his old car. He kept fidgeting with his tie and avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Linda began. "We're here to address the concerns raised by Jared Sollace regarding recent personnel decisions and corporate governance." "Let's cut to the chase," I interrupted. "I've reviewed the hiring documentation for Rick Sollace, and I have some questions about the process." James Morrison cleared his throat. "The board has full authority to approve executive appointments recommended by the CEO." "Absolutely. But those appointments should be based on qualifications and merit. So let's review Rick's qualifications, shall we?" I pulled out a folder and opened it. Rick Sollace, age 34. High school diploma. 2 years of community college, no degree. Previous employment includes retail sales, food service, and a brief stint as a used car salesman. "Experience isn't everything," Linda said. "Sometimes fresh perspective is more valuable than formal credentials." Fresh perspective. I nodded thoughtfully. "Rick, would you mind sharing some of that fresh perspective with us? What's your vision for Sollace Corporation's technical direction?" Rick looked like a deer caught in headlights. He glanced at Alara, who gave him what was probably supposed to be an encouraging nod. "Well," he began, his voice cracking slightly, "I think we need to focus more on social media integration and mobile apps. Everyone's using their phones for everything now." "Interesting. Can you be more specific? What kind of social media integration are you envisioning? Like connecting with Facebook and Twitter and those kinds of platforms, making it easier for users to share things." I waited for him to continue. When he didn't, I prompted, "Share what things, specifically?" Whatever they want to share." Board member Patricia Chen looked embarrassed for him. Even Linda was starting to look uncomfortable. "Rick," I continued, "can you tell us about our current database architecture?" "Our database?" "Yes. The system that stores and manages all of our client data. What platform are we using? How is it structured? What are the scalability limitations?" Rick's face had gone pale. "I'm still getting up to speed on the technical details." "How about our API framework? Can you explain how our services integrate with client systems?" "API?" Rick repeated the acronym like it was a foreign word. "Application Programming Interface," I clarified. "The protocols that allow different software systems to communicate with each other. It's pretty fundamental to what we do here." "Right. Yes. I'm learning about that." I closed the folder and looked around the table. "This man has been appointed Chief Technology Officer of a company that generates $50 million in annual revenue from highly technical services. He doesn't understand our database architecture, our API framework, or apparently what API even stands for. Can someone explain to me how this serves the company's interests?" "Jared, you're being unnecessarily harsh." Alara spoke for the first time. "Rick is intelligent and motivated. He can learn what he needs to know." "Can he? Because based on this conversation, he doesn't even understand what he needs to learn." "Rick, How long would you estimate it would take you to become proficient enough to make strategic technical decisions for this company? Rick looked desperately at Alara again. A few months? Maybe 6 months? 6 months, I repeated, during which time, who would actually be making the technical decisions? I would consult with the development team, obviously. The development team reports to the CTO, that's you. If you don't understand what they're telling you, how will you evaluate their recommendations? How will you know if they're proposing good solutions or just taking the easy path? The room fell silent. Board member Michael Torres shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Furthermore, I continued, I've discovered some interesting financial irregularities related to Rick's hiring. I pulled out another document. Rick, what salary are you being paid as CTO? I don't think that's relevant to this discussion, Alara interjected. It's completely relevant. Rick? He mumbled something inaudible. I'm sorry, could you speak up? 180,000, he said, barely louder. $180,000 annually, plus benefits, stock options, and a company car. For comparison, our previous CTO, that would be me, was earning $120,000 in the same role. Linda frowned. Salary levels are determined by market rates and experience. Experience? I almost laughed. Rick has 0 experience in technology leadership, 0 experience in corporate management, 0 relevant education or training. Yet he's being paid 50% more than the person who built every system this company runs on. Can someone explain that logic to me? James Morrison was scribbling notes frantically. Patricia Chen was staring at her hands. Michael Torres looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. There's more, I continued. Rick, where did you get the money for your new Mustang? I saved up from freelance work. What kind of freelance work? Consulting. Consulting on what? Business development. For which clients? Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. Because I've done some checking, and there's no record of you filing taxes on any freelance income. There's no record of any business license or consulting contracts. But there is a record of a $40,000 personal loan from Sollace Corporation to Rick Sollace, authorized by CEO Elara Sollace, dated 2 months ago. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Even Linda looked shocked. You gave him a personal loan? Patricia asked Alara. It was an advance against his signing bonus, Alara said defensively. What signing bonus? James Morrison was flipping through papers. There's no signing bonus listed in his employment contract. Alara's face was turning red. It was a verbal agreement. I intended to formalize it later. So you gave your romantic partner an unauthorized $40,000 advance against a bonus that didn't exist, and he used that money to buy a sports car while telling everyone he'd earned it through freelance consulting work. I looked around the table. Does anyone else see a problem with this arrangement? This is a witch hunt, Elara snapped. You're twisting everything because you're angry about our personal relationship. I don't care about your personal relationship. I care about corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility. You've hired an unqualified candidate at an inflated salary, given him an unauthorized loan, and created a massive conflict of interest. Any one of those things would be grounds for review. All 3 together constitute gross misconduct. Linda was looking increasingly uncomfortable. What exactly are you proposing, Jared? I'm proposing that Rick be terminated immediately. I'm proposing that Alara be suspended as CEO pending a full audit of her recent decisions. And I'm proposing that this board start taking its oversight responsibilities seriously before the company suffers irreparable damage. You can't just fire people because you don't like them, Rick said, finally finding his voice. You're right. I can't fire you because I don't like you. But I can fire you because you're incompetent, unqualified, and your hiring represents a breach of fiduciary duty by the CEO. I turned to face him directly. Rick, let me ask you something. Do you actually want this job? Of course I do. Really? Because you look terrified. You can't answer basic questions about the business. You're clearly in over your head. Why are you putting yourself through this? Rick glanced at Alara, and in that glance, I saw the truth. He didn't want the job. He'd never wanted the job. He was doing this for her, probably because she'd convinced him it was temporary, or because she'd promised him something else, or simply because he'd never been able to say no to a strong woman. Rick, I said more gently, you're not a bad person. You're just not qualified for this position. There's no shame in admitting that. Don't patronize him, Elara said coldly. Rick is perfectly capable of growing into this role. At the company's expense? While drawing a salary he hasn't earned and making decisions that could cost us millions? I shook my head. I won't allow it. James Morrison cleared his throat. Jared, what you're proposing would essentially mean taking control of the company away from the board and the current management structure. No, James. What I'm proposing is that the majority shareholder exercise his legal rights to protect his investment. Everything I'm doing is clearly outlined in the corporate bylaws that this board approved. But surely we can reach some kind of compromise, Linda suggested. Perhaps Rick could move to a different role, something more suited to his current skill level. What role would that be? We don't have positions for people with no relevant skills or experience. This isn't a charity. You're being unreasonable, Alara said. Rick has potential. He just needs time to develop. Then he can develop on his own time, with his own money, not on the company's payroll. I stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the city below. 15 years ago, I'd stood in this same spot when the building was just an empty shell, envisioning what Sollace Corporation could become. I'd built something real and valuable, something that employed 47 people and generated millions in revenue. I wasn't going to let it be destroyed by nepotism and poor judgment. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to face the room. Rick will submit his resignation by close of business today. Alara will take a leave of absence while we conduct a full audit of recent personnel and financial decisions. The board will work with me to establish new hiring protocols that prioritize qualifications over personal relationships. And if we refuse? Linda asked. Then I'll call a shareholder meeting and remove every one of you from the board. I'll install new directors who understand that their job is to protect the company's interests, not to rubber stamp bad decisions made by compromised executives. The room fell silent again. I could see the board members exchanging glances, having silent conversations with their eyes. We need to discuss this privately, Linda said finally. Of course, take all the time you need. But remember, every day Rick remains in that position is another day of potential damage to the company. And every day this situation continues is another day that our employees, our clients, and our investors lose confidence in our leadership. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. I've frozen all corporate accounts pending resolution of this matter. No expenditures over $10,000 can be authorized without my signature, just to make sure no more unauthorized advances are distributed while we sort this out. Alara's face went white. You can't do that. Actually, I can. Section 15(7) of the corporate bylaws, financial controls during periods of leadership review. I smiled pleasantly. I wrote those bylaws myself, back when I was naive enough to think they'd never be necessary. I left the boardroom and walked to the elevator, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear raised voices beginning what was sure to be a very interesting discussion. The elevator doors opened to reveal Mike Rizzo, wearing his usual jeans and work shirt, looking completely out of place in the corporate environment. Mike, what are you doing here? Thought you might need some moral support. How did it go? Better than expected. Want to grab some coffee and watch the fireworks? We found a coffee shop across the street with a clear view of the Sollace Corporation building. Through the windows, we could see people moving around urgently on the executive floor. So what happens now? Mike asked. Now we wait. The board has three choices. They can do what I've asked, they can try to fight me legally, or they can try to find some kind of middle ground. Given that I hold 87% of the voting shares, the smart play is obvious. And if they're not smart? Then things get interesting. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. We have options you haven't considered. I showed the message to Mike, who frowned. That sounds vaguely threatening. It's probably Rick, trying to sound tougher than he is. Or maybe Alara, trying to make me think she has some kind of ace up her sleeve. Do they? I considered the question seriously. I don't think so. I've been through every document, every contract, every agreement. My position is solid. The only way they could hurt me is if they found some way to damage the company itself, but that would hurt them just as much. Unless that's exactly what they're planning. The thought hadn't occurred to me, but Mike had a point. If Alara and Rick were desperate enough, they might try to sabotage the company rather than let me regain control. It would be a scorched earth strategy that would hurt everyone involved, but people don't always make rational decisions when they're cornered. I need to get back to the office, I said. There are some things I should secure before this gets any uglier. We walked back across the street and rode the elevator to the executive floor. The hallway was buzzing with activity. Assistants hurrying between offices, executives having hushed conversations, everyone trying to figure out what was happening and how it might affect them. I walked to my old office, the one where Rick had been photographed sitting behind my desk. The door was locked, but I still had my master key card. Inside, I found that most of my personal items had been boxed up and stacked in a corner. My diplomas were gone from the walls, replaced by generic corporate art. Rick had moved in completely, even bringing his own coffee mug and a small cactus plant. I sat down at the desk and logged into the computer system using my administrative access. Over the next hour, I systematically secured every critical system and database, changing passwords and access permissions to ensure that no one could make unauthorized changes or deletions. I also created complete backups of all essential data and stored them on secure external servers. While I worked, I could hear voices in the hallway, people discussing the morning's events, speculating about what would happen next. The general mood seemed to be one of confusion and concern. Most employees had no idea why their CTO had been fired and replaced with someone they'd never heard of, and now that person's qualifications were being publicly questioned. Around noon, Linda Voss appeared in my doorway. The board has reached a decision, she said. I'm listening. Rick will resign from the CTO position, effective immediately. However, we're offering him a consulting contract to help with business development initiatives. No. Jared, be reasonable. We need to give him something. Why? He was hired for a job he can't do, given money he didn't earn, and now he's facing the natural consequences of that situation. Why does he deserve anything more? Because he's family. Because this situation is complicated. Because we're trying to find a solution that works for everyone. The solution that works for everyone is for Rick to leave the company completely. No consulting contract, no severance package, no ongoing relationship of any kind. That seems harsh. It's realistic. Rick has no business being involved with this company in any capacity. Keeping him around in some made-up consulting role just perpetuates the original problem. Linda sighed. And Alara? What about her? The board is willing to accept a temporary leave of absence, but we want assurance that she'll be able to return to her position once this situation is resolved. That depends on what the audit reveals. If she's been making other questionable decisions, her return might not be in the company's best interests. She's been an effective CEO. She's been an adequate CEO who just made a catastrophically bad hiring decision. That calls her judgment into question. So what do you want? I want Rick gone by end of business today. I want Alara on administrative leave pending a complete review. I want full access to all financial records and personnel files. And I want the board to acknowledge that major hiring decisions will require majority shareholder approval going forward. That last point essentially gives you veto power over all executive appointments. That's correct. Linda was quiet for a long moment. The board will need to vote on these terms. Then they should vote quickly. Every hour this drags on makes the company look more unstable. After Linda left, I continued working on securing the computer systems. Around 2 p.m., I heard a commotion in the hallway. Through my office window, I could see Rick clearing out his desk, stuffing items into a cardboard box while Alara stood nearby looking furious. A few minutes later, Rick appeared in my doorway. "Satisfied?" he asked. "I'm satisfied that the company is no longer at risk from unqualified leadership, if that's what you mean." "You destroyed my career." "Rick, you never had a career to destroy. You had a job you weren't qualified for, funded by money that wasn't properly authorized. That's not a career. It's a mistake that's been corrected." Elara believed in me. Elara was sleeping with you. Her judgment was compromised. Rick set his box down and stepped into the office. "You know what your problem is, Jared? You think you're better than everyone else. You think because you're smart and successful, that gives you the right to control other people's lives. I think because I own 87% of this company, that gives me the right to protect it from bad decisions. If you want to call that controlling, that's your choice. This isn't over." "Yes, Rick, it is. It's completely over. You're leaving this building today and you're not coming back. You're going to find a job that actually matches your skills and experience, and you're going to stop pretending to be something you're not." "And what about Alara? What about her? You're just going to throw away 12 years of marriage because of one mistake?" I looked at him carefully. "Rick, do you really think this was one mistake? Do you think Alara woke up one morning and randomly decided to have an affair with you and give you a job you're not qualified for? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like?" Rick picked up his box and headed for the door. "You'll find out soon enough." After he left, I sat back in my chair and tried to process what he'd just said. There was something in his tone, something that suggested this situation was more complicated than I'd realized. My phone rang. James Morrison's name appeared on the screen. "The board has voted," he said. "Rick's resignation has been accepted. Alara is taking administrative leave. You'll have full access to financial records and personnel files, and going forward, executive appointments above the director level will require majority shareholder approval." "Good. When does this take effect?" "Immediately. Elara is cleaning out her office now." "And the audit?" "We'll bring in an independent firm to review all personnel and financial decisions made in the past year. Should take about 2 weeks. Make sure they pay particular attention to any unusual expenditures or policy changes." "Of course." After I hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The immediate crisis was over, but I had the feeling that Rick's parting words were more than just empty bluster. There was something else going on, something I hadn't discovered yet. My phone buzzed with another text from the same unknown number. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts. You have no idea what's coming." This time, I didn't dismiss the message as easily. Someone was planning something, and I needed to figure out what it was before they had a chance to implement it. The game was far from over. 3 days after Rick's resignation, I was starting to believe that maybe the worst was behind us. The company was running smoothly with interim management, the audit was proceeding without any major surprises, and the mysterious threatening texts had stopped coming. I should have known better. The first sign of trouble came at 7 a.m. on Thursday morning. I was in my kitchen, drinking coffee and reviewing the preliminary audit results, when my phone started ringing. Mike Rizzo's name appeared on the screen. "Turn on Channel 7 News," he said without preamble. "Why? What's happening?" "Just turn it on." I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news channel. A perfectly coiffed reporter was standing in front of the Sollace Corporation building, speaking earnestly into the camera. "Allegations of corporate misconduct and abuse of power have rocked the local tech company. We're joined now by former Chief Technology Officer Rick Sollace, who claims he was wrongfully terminated after discovering financial irregularities. The camera panned to show Rick wearing his most expensive suit and trying to look serious and professional. Next to him stood a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, sharp-featured, wearing the kind of power suit that screamed, "Attorney." "Mr. Sollace," the reporter continued, "you're alleging that your brother, majority shareholder Jared Sollace, engaged in systematic financial misconduct?" "That's correct," Rick said, his voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. "During my brief time as CTO, I discovered evidence of embezzlement, tax evasion, and misappropriation of corporate funds. When I tried to report these irregularities to the board, Jared used his majority ownership position to have me fired. I nearly choked on my coffee. Are you kidding me?" "There's more," Mike said grimly. The reporter turned to the attorney. "Ms. Harper, you're representing Mr. Sollace in this matter?" "That's right. We've filed complaints with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service, and the State Attorney General's office. We're also pursuing civil litigation for wrongful termination and defamation." Harper. The name triggered a memory. Harper Collins, Elara's college roommate and longtime friend. She'd become a corporate attorney specializing in white-collar crime and had always harbored a grudge against me for some perceived slight years ago. "What specific evidence do you have of these alleged crimes?" the reporter asked. Rick pulled out a folder. "Bank records showing unauthorized transfers, email communications discussing tax avoidance strategies, documentation of personal expenses being charged to corporate accounts." "This is unbelievable," I muttered. "It gets worse," Mike said. The camera cut back to the reporter. "We reached out to Sollace Corporation for comment, but representatives declined to speak on camera. However, we did receive this statement from CEO Elara Sollace." A graphic appeared on screen with Elara's photo and a written statement. "While I cannot comment on ongoing legal matters, I can confirm that serious questions have been raised about corporate governance and financial management. The board is conducting a thorough investigation, and we are cooperating fully with all relevant authorities." I turned off the television and sat in stunned silence. In less than 5 minutes, my reputation had been completely destroyed on live television. Rick had accused me of multiple felonies, backed up by an attorney who clearly had access to inside information, and my own wife had essentially confirmed that the allegations were credible. "Mike, I need to call my lawyer." "Already on it. David Chen is expecting your call." David Chen was the best corporate attorney in the city, and he'd handled the legal work when I'd first incorporated Sollace Corporation. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. I called David immediately. His secretary put me through right away. "Jared, I saw the news. How much of what Rick said is true?" "None of it." "David, I've never embezzled a penny from my own company. I've never evaded taxes or misappropriated funds. This is complete fiction." "Then where did he get the documentation he was showing on camera?" "I have no idea, but I intend to find out." "We need to meet immediately. Can you be at my office in an hour?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes. David's office was in the financial district, occupying the top floor of a gleaming tower that housed some of the city's most prestigious law firms. His conference room had a view that rivaled the one from Sollace Corporation, and the walls were lined with awards and photographs documenting his successful career. "Show me everything," he said as soon as I walked in. I spent the next 2 hours going through every financial document, every email, every transaction record I could access. David reviewed each item carefully, occasionally asking questions or requesting clarification. "Jared," he said finally, "based on what I'm seeing here, Rick's allegations are completely baseless. Your financial management has been exemplary. Every transaction is properly documented, every tax payment is current, every corporate expense is legitimate. Then how is he planning to prove his case?" "He's not. This isn't about proving anything. It's about destroying your reputation and creating leverage for a settlement." "What do you mean?" Think about it. Rick goes on television and makes sensational accusations. The media runs with the story because corporate corruption sells. Government agencies are forced to investigate because the allegations are now public. Meanwhile, your company's stock price crashes, your clients start getting nervous, and your employees begin looking for other jobs. I felt sick. So, even though the allegations are false, they can still destroy the company. Exactly. And then Harper, who I'm guessing is the real architect of this strategy, approaches you with a settlement offer. Drop the corporate governance complaints, reinstate Rick and Elara, pay some substantial sum in damages, and they'll make the criminal allegations go away. That's extortion. It's also very effective. Most people would pay rather than risk everything on the chance that the truth eventually comes out. But you said the allegations are baseless. They are. But investigations take time, trials take longer, and in the meantime, your business suffers irreparable damage. I walked to the window and looked down at the city below. Somewhere out there, Rick and Harper were probably celebrating their successful ambush. They'd taken my moment of victory and turned it into a potential catastrophe. David, what are my options? We can fight this aggressively. File counter-suits for defamation and malicious prosecution. Demand expedited hearings to get the truth on the record quickly. Go on the offensive instead of just defending. What are the risks? If we fight and lose, you could face serious criminal charges. If we fight and win, you'll still have spent months and potentially millions of dollars clearing your name. And if we settle, you admit no wrongdoing, pay some money, and this all goes away. But you also give up control of your company and validate their tactics. I turned back to face him. There's a third option, isn't there? What do you mean? I mean, what if we can prove that Rick and Harper fabricated evidence? What if we can show that this whole thing is a deliberate fraud? David raised an eyebrow. That would change everything, but it would also be very difficult to prove. Maybe not as difficult as they think. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. David, I need you to file for an emergency injunction to prevent any further public statements about these allegations. I also need you to demand immediate access to all documents Rick claims support his accusations. That's aggressive. Are you sure you want to escalate this? They escalated it the moment they went on television with fabricated evidence. Now I'm going to show them what real corporate warfare looks like. After leaving David's office, I drove straight to Sollace Corporation. The parking lot was buzzing with activity. News vans, reporters with cameras, and curious onlookers who'd come to see the scene of the alleged corporate crime. I parked in my reserved space and walked through the crowd, ignoring the shouted questions and camera flashes. Inside the building, I could see that the lobby was filled with employees who looked confused and worried. Mr. Sollace! A reporter managed to get close enough to shout a question. Do you have any response to the allegations made by your brother? I stopped and turned to face the cameras. This was a calculated risk, but I needed to get ahead of the narrative. I have a simple response, I said clearly. Every allegation made by Rick Sollace is completely false. He was terminated from his position because he was unqualified, and his hiring represented a conflict of interest. Now he's attempting to extort money from the company through fabricated accusations. Are you saying your brother is lying? I'm saying that anyone who reviews the actual financial records will see that these allegations have no basis in fact. I welcome any investigation by any agency, because the truth will completely vindicate me. What about the documents he showed on television? I haven't seen those documents, but I guarantee they're either fabricated or taken out of context. When the authorities review the complete records, Rick's deception will be exposed. I walked into the building before anyone could ask follow-up questions. The lobby fell silent as I passed through, employees staring at me with expressions ranging from sympathy to suspicion. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like the longest of my life. When the doors opened, I was surprised to see Linda Voss waiting for me. Jared, we need to talk. I'm sure we do. We walked to the boardroom where I found the other 6 board members already assembled. The atmosphere was tense, and I could see that several of them were struggling to make eye contact with me. "I assume you all saw the news this morning?" I said, taking my seat at the table. "We did," Linda replied, "and we've been discussing the situation." "What kind of discussion?" James Morrison cleared his throat. "Jared, these are very serious allegations. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to investigate any claims of financial misconduct." "Of course you do. And when you investigate, you'll find that every allegation is completely false." "We hope that's the case," Patricia Chen said. "But in the meantime, we think it might be best if you stepped back from day-to-day operations." I stared at her. "You want to suspend me based on fabricated allegations made by someone we just fired for incompetence?" "We want to protect the company," Linda said. "If these allegations gain traction, our clients and investors could lose confidence. We need to show that we're taking the situation seriously." "By validating Rick's lies?" "By conducting a thorough and impartial investigation." I stood up and walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room. "Let me explain something to all of you. Rick Sollace spent exactly 4 days as an employee of this company. During that time, he had no access to financial records, no involvement in strategic decisions, and no knowledge of our operational procedures." I drew a timeline on the board. "The documents he claims show financial misconduct would have to cover a period of several years. How exactly did he obtain access to historical financial data during his 4-day tenure as CTO?" The room fell silent. I could see several board members exchanging glances. "Furthermore," I continued, "Rick's attorney is Harper Collins, who happens to be Alara's best friend and college roommate. Harper has harbored a personal grudge against me for years, dating back to an incident where I exposed her plagiarism during a joint presentation." I turned to face the board directly. "This isn't a whistleblower situation. This is a coordinated attack designed to force me out of my own company. And if you can't see that, then you're not qualified to serve on this board." Michael Torres spoke up. "Jared, even if you're right about their motivations, we still have to deal with the reality of the situation. Government agencies are going to investigate. The media is going to keep covering this story. Our stock price has already dropped 15% since this morning. Then we fight back. We expose Rick's lies. We sue Harper for malicious prosecution, and we show the world that Sollace Corporation won't be intimidated by extortion attempts." "That's a very risky strategy," Linda said. "Riskier than letting them destroy the company with fabricated allegations? What if you're wrong? What if there's some truth to what Rick is saying?" I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "Linda, I'm going to give you access to every financial account, every email, every document related to this company's operations. You can bring in any auditor you want, any investigator you want, any expert you want. If you find even 1 penny that's been misappropriated, I'll resign immediately and accept full responsibility. And if we don't find anything, then you'll publicly support me in fighting these allegations, and you'll help me destroy the people who are trying to destroy our company." The board members looked at each other uncertainly. Finally, James Morrison spoke. "We'll need to vote on this." "Then vote. But understand that every hour you spend deliberating is another hour that Rick and Harper have to do more damage." While the board discussed my proposal in private, I went to my office and started making phone calls. First, I called the head of our IT security department and asked him to conduct a comprehensive audit of all system access logs for the past 6 months. If Rick had somehow obtained confidential financial data, there would be a digital trail. Next, I called our accounting firm and asked them to prepare a complete financial summary going back 5 years. I wanted documentation that would clearly refute every allegation Rick had made. Finally, I called Mike Rizzo. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I've been better. Mike, I need a favor." "Name it." "I need you to do some digging into Harper Collins. Find out what she's been up to lately, who she's been working with, how she's financing this campaign against me. You think there's more to this than just Rick and Alara? I think Harper is the real mastermind here. Rick doesn't have the intelligence or the resources to orchestrate something this sophisticated. Alara has the motivation but not the legal expertise. Harper has both the skills and the grudge to pull this off. I'll see what I can find out. An hour later, Linda knocked on my office door. The board has reached a decision, she said. I'm listening. We're going to support your proposal, full financial transparency, independent investigation, and public support if you're vindicated. And if the investigation takes too long, if the company suffers irreparable damage while we're waiting for the truth to come out, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. It wasn't the ringing endorsement I'd hoped for, but it was better than being suspended based on fabricated allegations. There's one more thing, Linda said. The board thinks it would be helpful if Elara returned from administrative leave to help manage the crisis. Absolutely not. Jared, she knows the company operations better than anyone except you, and her presence might help calm client concerns. Her presence will validate Rick's allegations. The woman who hired him and gave him unauthorized loans is not the person we want representing corporate governance right now. She's still the CEO. She's on administrative leave pending the outcome of our internal audit. That hasn't changed. Linda sighed. This situation is becoming impossible to manage. It's only impossible if we let Rick and Harper control the narrative. If we fight back aggressively and expose their lies, we can turn this around. And if we can't, then we'll all go down together, but at least we'll go down fighting for the truth instead of surrendering to extortion. After Linda left, I sat in my office and tried to plan my next move. Rick and Harper had gotten the first punch in, but the fight was far from over. I had resources they didn't know about, allies they hadn't considered, and a determination they'd underestimated. My phone buzzed with a text message from the same unknown number that had been sending threats. Enjoying the news coverage? This is just the beginning. Wait until you see what we have planned next. This time, instead of ignoring the message, I forwarded it to David Chen with a note. Evidence of coordinated harassment campaign. Use this. If Rick and Harper wanted to play dirty, I was ready to show them just how dirty the game could get. The war for Sollace Corporation was just beginning. The next morning brought a development I hadn't expected. I was reviewing security footage from the office building when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer it. Mr. Sollace? This is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss the allegations that have been made against you. My stomach dropped. Agent Martinez, I'm happy to cooperate with any investigation, but I'd prefer to have my attorney present. Of course. Would this afternoon work? Say 2 o'clock at our downtown office? I'll be there. I immediately called David Chen, who rearranged his schedule to accompany me. Then I called Mike Rizzo to update him on the situation. The FBI? Mike sounded as shocked as I felt. Rick really went all the way with this. It's not Rick, I said. Rick doesn't have the connections or the sophistication to get federal agents involved this quickly. This is Harper's doing. What did you find out about her? That's what I was calling about. I've been digging into Harper Collins' background, and there are some interesting patterns. She's represented several clients in cases involving corporate takeovers and shareholder disputes. Her specialty seems to be using regulatory agencies and media pressure to force settlements. You think she's done this before? I think she's made a career out of it, and I think she's been planning this attack on me for a lot longer than we realized. The FBI office was a stark, intimidating building downtown. Agent Martinez turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen every type of corporate criminal imaginable. She led David and me to a small conference room and got straight to business. Mr. Sollace, we've received allegations that you've been embezzling funds from Sollace Corporation and evading federal taxes. Can you tell me your response to these charges? The allegations are completely false, I said. I've never embezzled money from my own company, and all of my tax obligations are current. Your brother provided us with documentation that appears to show unauthorized transfers from corporate accounts to personal accounts. David leaned forward. Agent Martinez, we'd like to examine those documents. Our preliminary review of Mr. Sollace's financial records shows no evidence of any impropriety. I can provide copies of the materials we've received. She slid a folder across the table. These appear to show a pattern of financial misconduct going back several years. I opened the folder and began reviewing the documents. What I found unsettled me, not because the evidence was convincing, but because it had been fabricated with such precision. The papers showed bank statements, email printouts, and transaction records that looked legitimate at first glance. But as I studied them more closely, I could see the subtle signs of manipulation. Dates that didn't align with actual events, email headers that contained technical inconsistencies, transaction amounts that had been altered. Agent Martinez, I said, these documents have been falsified. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Sollace. It's also true. Look at this email, supposedly from me to our accounting firm. I pointed to one of the printouts. The timestamp shows it was sent at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, but if you check the metadata, you'll see that our email server automatically logs all outbound messages, and there's no record of this email being sent. David was studying another document. Agent Martinez, this bank statement shows a transfer of $50,000 from a Sollace Corporation account to Mr. Sollace's personal account, but the account number listed here doesn't match any account that Sollace Corporation has ever maintained. Agent Martinez frowned and made notes. Are you saying that your brother provided us with fabricated evidence? I'm saying that someone provided you with fabricated evidence. Whether Rick knew it was fake or whether he was being used by someone else remains to be seen. Who else would have access to this type of financial information? Very few people. The CEO, the CFO, the head of accounting, and our external auditors. That's about it. And your brother wasn't in any of those positions? Rick was employed as CTO for exactly 4 days. He had no access to historical financial data and no authority to review corporate accounts. Agent Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Sollace, if these documents are fabricated, then someone has committed a federal crime by providing false information to law enforcement. That's correct. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I exchanged glances with David, who nodded slightly. Agent Martinez, I believe this is part of a coordinated effort to force me out of my company. The person I suspect is Harper Collins, an attorney who represents my brother and who has both the technical knowledge and the motivation to orchestrate this type of fraud. What's her motivation? I explained the history between Harper and me, including the incident years ago where I'd exposed her plagiarism. Agent Martinez took detailed notes and asked several follow-up questions. We'll need to verify your claims about these documents, she said finally. In the meantime, I'd recommend that you avoid making any public statements about this investigation. Agent Martinez, with respect, my reputation and my company are being destroyed by false allegations. I can't just remain silent while that happens. I understand your frustration, but premature disclosure could compromise our investigation. After we left the FBI office, David and I went back to his law firm to plan our strategy. This is actually good news, he said. If we can prove that Harper fabricated evidence and provided it to federal agents, she's looking at serious criminal charges. That gives us tremendous leverage. How do we prove it? We need to demonstrate that the documents couldn't have been created through legitimate means. Your IT security audit should help with that. We also need to show that Harper had both the means and the opportunity to create fake documents. What about Rick? Do you think he knew the documents were fabricated? Hard to say. He might be a willing accomplice, or he might be another victim of Harper's manipulation. Either way, he's in serious legal jeopardy for providing false information to federal agents. That evening, I met Mike at his gym to update him on the day's events and to hear what he'd learned about Harper Collins. You were right about her, Mike said, as we walked to his office. Harper has been involved in at least 3 similar cases over the past 5 years. Each time she represented someone who made allegations of corporate misconduct against a majority shareholder or CEO. What happened in those cases? 2 of them settled out of court for substantial amounts. The third one went to trial, and Harper's client lost badly when it came out that key evidence had been fabricated. So she has a track record of this kind of behavior. Gets better. I talked to a private investigator who worked on that third case. He says Harper has connections with people who specialize in creating fake documents and manipulating digital evidence. Professional document forgers? Something like that. Apparently there's a whole underground industry of people who help with corporate espionage and litigation fraud. I felt a surge of excitement. Mike, if we can connect Harper to these document forgers, we can prove that she orchestrated the entire scheme. That's what I was thinking. The PI gave me some names of people who might be willing to talk if the price is right. Do it, whatever it costs. There's one more thing, Mike said. I did some checking on Rick's finances. You know that $40,000 loan he got from the company? What about it? He didn't spend it all on the car. About $15,000 of it went to Harper Collins's law firm as a retainer. So Rick paid Harper to represent him using money he embezzled from my company. Looks that way, which means Harper has been planning this for at least 2 months, probably longer. I sat back in Mike's office chair and tried to process everything I'd learned. Harper had been orchestrating a complex fraud designed to destroy my reputation and force me out of my company. She'd manipulated Rick into being her front man, used Elara's romantic involvement to create a plausible motive, and fabricated evidence to support criminal allegations. It was sophisticated, ruthless, and almost certainly illegal. Mike, I need you to document everything you found: names, dates, financial transactions, connections between the various players. We're going to need a complete picture of this conspiracy if we want to take them down. Already on it. I've got a whole file building. My phone buzzed with a text message. This time it wasn't from the unknown number. It was from Alara. We need to talk. Meet me at the house at 9 p.m. Come alone. I showed the message to Mike, who frowned. Could be a trap. Could be, but it might also be an opportunity to find out how much Alara knows about Harper's plan. You want me to come with you? No, but stay by your phone. If you don't hear from me by 10 p.m., call David Chen. The house felt strange when I walked in at 9 p.m. Alara had changed the lighting, moved some furniture around, and added decorations that made the place look more like a hotel than a home. She was waiting for me in the living room, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. Thank you for coming, she said. What do you want, Alara? I want to end this before it destroys all of us. End what? The investigation into your boyfriend's fabricated allegations? Jared, sit down, please. We need to have an honest conversation. Against my better judgment, I sat in the chair across from her. I'm listening. Rick didn't fabricate those documents. Then who did? I don't know, but I know Rick isn't smart enough or sophisticated enough to create the kind of evidence he showed to the FBI. So you admit the evidence is fake? I admit that something doesn't add up. Rick has been acting strange lately, nervous, like he's in over his head with something he doesn't understand. When did you first realize that? A few days ago. He kept asking me questions about our financial systems, about how our accounting works, about who has access to what information. It was like he was trying to understand something that someone else had told him. Someone like Harper Collins? Elara's face went pale. How did you know about Harper? I know that she's Rick's attorney. I know that she's your college friend, and I know that she's been planning this attack for months. Harper wouldn't do something like this, wouldn't she? Alara, Harper has harbored a grudge against me for years. She sees this situation as the perfect opportunity to destroy me while making herself rich in the process. You're being paranoid. Am I? Tell me something, Alara. Who suggested that Rick apply for the CTO position? It was a mutual decision. Whose idea was it originally? Alara was quiet for a long moment. Harper mentioned that Rick might be a good fit for a leadership role. And who suggested that Rick hire Harper as his attorney? Harper offered to help when the situation became complicated. How convenient. And who do you think provided Rick with the documents he showed to the FBI? I don't know. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to admit it because it means acknowledging that your best friend has been using you to destroy your husband. Elara stood up and walked to the window. Even if you're right about Harper, that doesn't change what's happened between us. Our marriage is over, Jared. We both know that. Our marriage ended the moment you decided to sleep with my brother. Everything else is just consequences. So what happens now? Now, I prove that Harper fabricated evidence and provided it to federal agents. Then I watch her get arrested for fraud and obstruction of justice. After that, I decide whether Rick was a willing accomplice or just another one of her victims. And me? You get to live with the knowledge that your best friend manipulated you into destroying your own marriage and your husband's company. That should be punishment enough. Alara turned back to face me. Jared, what if I could help you prove what Harper did? What do you mean? I mean, what if I could get her to admit that she fabricated the documents? Why would you do that? Because despite everything that's happened, I don't want to see you destroyed by false allegations. And because I'm starting to realize that Harper might have been manipulating me from the beginning. I studied her face, trying to determine if this was genuine remorse or another manipulation. What are you proposing? Let me talk to Harper. Let me see if I can get her to reveal what she's really doing. That's dangerous. If Harper realizes that you're working against her, she might escalate her attacks. I'm willing to take that risk. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And because maybe if we can stop Harper, we can find a way to end this mess without destroying the company. I considered her offer. Having Alara as an ally instead of an enemy would certainly make things easier. But I wasn't sure I could trust her, given everything that had happened. If you're serious about this, there are conditions, I said finally. Name them. First, Rick has to publicly retract his allegations and admit that the documents were provided to him by someone else. Second, you have to testify truthfully about Harper's role in this conspiracy. Third, you have to accept that our marriage is over and that you'll be resigning as CEO once this is resolved. Those are harsh terms. They're fair terms, given the circumstances. Take them or leave them. Alara was quiet for several minutes. Finally, she nodded. I'll do it, but I want something in return. What? I want your promise that you won't pursue criminal charges against Rick if it turns out he was being manipulated by Harper. I can't promise that. If Rick committed crimes, he has to face the consequences. Then I can't help you. I stood up to leave. Then Harper wins, and we all lose. Your choice, Elara. As I reached the door, she called out, Wait! I turned back. I'll do it, she said. I'll help you expose Harper and I'll accept your conditions. But please try to remember that Rick is still your brother. Rick stopped being my brother the moment he chose to betray me. Now he's just another person who made bad choices and has to live with the consequences. I left the house feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time in days. If Alara was sincere about helping expose Harper's conspiracy, we might actually have a chance to turn this situation around. But I'd learned not to trust anyone completely. Tomorrow, I'd find out whether Alara was truly ready to do the right thing or whether this was just another layer of deception in Harper's elaborate scheme. The game was getting more complex, but I was finally starting to understand the rules. The next morning, I received a call that changed everything. Agent Martinez from the FBI sounded excited, which was unusual for a federal investigator. Mr. Sollace, we've completed our preliminary analysis of the documents your brother provided. You were right, they've been extensively falsified. How can you tell? multiple indicators, digital timestamps that don't match server logs, metadata inconsistencies, and several documents that reference events that never occurred. Whoever created these did professional quality work, but they made enough small mistakes that our forensics team was able to identify the forgeries. What happens now? Now we shift our focus to determining who created these documents and why. We'll need your full cooperation in identifying potential suspects. You'll have it. After hanging up with Agent Martinez, I called David Chen to update him on this development. Then I called Alara to see if she'd made any progress with Harper. "I'm meeting Harper for lunch today," Elara said. "I'm going to try to get her to talk about the case. Be careful. If Harper realizes you're working with me, she might do something desperate. I understand the risks." "Elara, are you wearing a wire or recording this conversation in any way?" "No, should I be?" "It might help, but it's also dangerous. If Harper discovers you're recording her, it could make things much worse." "I'll see what I can do." That afternoon, while Elara was meeting with Harper, I drove to Mike's gym to review the information he'd gathered about Harper's previous cases and her connections to document forgers. "I've got some interesting news," Mike said as soon as I walked into his office. "Remember that private investigator I mentioned? The one who worked on Harper's previous case? What about him? He's willing to testify about Harper's methods. Apparently, she's used the same document forger in multiple cases. A guy named Tommy Chen, who operates out of a print shop downtown. Can we prove the connection? Better than that. Tommy Chen got arrested last month on an unrelated fraud charge. He's looking to make a deal with prosecutors, and he's willing to provide information about his previous clients. Including Harper? Especially Harper. Apparently she owes him money from their last job together. This was the break we'd been waiting for. If Tommy Chen could testify that Harper had hired him to create fake documents, we'd have the proof we needed to expose the entire conspiracy. "Mike, can you arrange a meeting with Chen?" "Already working on it. His lawyer says he'll talk if we can guarantee that his cooperation will be passed along to the prosecutor handling his case." "Done." My phone rang while Mike was making arrangements. Elara's name appeared on the screen. "How did it go?" I asked. "Better than expected. Harper is definitely behind this, and she's planning something bigger." "What do you mean?" "She told me that the FBI investigation is just the beginning. She's also filed complaints with the SEC and the State Attorney General, and she's planning to leak more evidence to the media next week." "More fabricated documents?" "That's what it sounded like. Jared, Harper is completely obsessed with destroying you. She talked about it like it was a personal mission." "Did you get any of this on recording?" "Some of it. I used my phone to record parts of our conversation." "Good. Can you meet me at David Chen's office? We need to plan our next move." An hour later, Elara, David, Mike, and I were gathered in the law firm's conference room, listening to the audio recording Elara had made of her lunch with Harper. Harper's voice came through clearly. Rick was the perfect front man for this operation. Jared never suspected that his own brother would be working with me to bring him down. "But what if the FBI discovers that the documents are fake?" Elara's voice asked. "They won't. Tommy Chen does excellent work, and I've been very careful to make sure there's no direct connection between me and the forgeries." "What if Jared fights back?" "Let him try. By the time he figures out what's really happening, his reputation will be destroyed and his company will be worthless. Then we'll offer to buy him out for pennies on the dollar." David paused the recording. "That's a clear admission of conspiracy and fraud." "Is it enough to prove our case?" I asked. "Combined with the FBI's forensic analysis and Tommy Chen's testimony, it should be more than enough." "What about Rick?" Elara asked. "The recording makes it sound like he was a willing participant." "That's for the prosecutors to determine," David said. "But based on what Harper said, it sounds like Rick knew exactly what he was doing." I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that we finally had proof of Harper's conspiracy, and sadness that my own brother had been a willing participant in the scheme to destroy me. "What's our next move?" I asked. "We take everything to Agent Martinez immediately," David said. "The recording, the information about Tommy Chen, and any other evidence we've gathered. Then we let the FBI handle Harper and Rick while we focus on repairing the damage to your company." The next morning, David and I met with Agent Martinez at the FBI office. She listened to Alara's recording with obvious interest, taking detailed notes and asking clarifying questions. "This is excellent evidence," she said when the recording finished. "Combined with our forensic analysis, it clearly establishes a pattern of fraud and conspiracy." "What happens to Harper and Rick?" I asked. "They'll both be arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, providing false information to federal agents, and several other felonies. If convicted, they're looking at significant prison time. How long before arrests are made? We'll need to coordinate with local prosecutors and gather a few more pieces of evidence, but I'd expect arrests within the next few days." "Agent Martinez, I'd like to request that the arrests be made publicly. Harper has spent weeks destroying my reputation through media manipulation. I think it's only fair that her arrest receive the same kind of coverage. We can arrange for that." 3 days later, I was in my office at Sollace Corporation when the news broke. Channel 7 interrupted regular programming with a special report. FBI arrests local attorney in corporate fraud scheme. The camera showed Harper Collins being led out of her law office in handcuffs, surrounded by federal agents and news cameras. The reporter's voice provided commentary. "Harper Collins, a prominent corporate attorney, has been arrested on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and providing false information to federal agents in connection with fabricated allegations against Sollace Corporation CEO Jared Sollace." A few minutes later, the news showed Rick being arrested at his apartment. He looked confused and frightened, nothing like the confident executive he'd pretended to be just a week earlier. My phone started ringing immediately. Reporters wanting comments, board members wanting updates, employees wanting reassurance that the company was stable. I called Linda Voss first. "I assume you've seen the news?" "We all have. Jared, on behalf of the entire board, I want to apologize for doubting you. We should have recognized that the allegations were fabricated. The important thing is that the truth is finally coming out. What's the board's position going forward?" "Full support for your leadership, and whatever actions you think are necessary to restore the company's reputation." "Good. I want to call an all-hands meeting this afternoon to address the employees directly, and I want to issue a press release explaining what really happened. Whatever you need." Next, I called Agent Martinez to thank her for the FBI's thorough investigation. "Mr. Sollace, I have to say, this was one of the most sophisticated document forgery schemes we've encountered. If you hadn't been so persistent in challenging the evidence, Harper Collins might have gotten away with it." "What's the status of the case against her?" "She's been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and several other felonies. Her bail hearing is tomorrow, but given the severity of the charges and the risk of flight, we're recommending she be held without bail." "And Rick? Your brother is being charged as a co-conspirator. However, his attorney is claiming that he was manipulated by Collins and didn't fully understand what he was doing. Do you believe that?" "The evidence suggests he was a willing participant, but that's for a jury to decide." That afternoon, I stood in front of all 47 employees of Sollace Corporation and explained what had really happened over the past 2 weeks. "I know this has been a confusing and stressful time for everyone," I began. "You've seen your CEO arrested on television, watched federal agents investigate our company, and wondered whether your jobs were secure. The truth is that we were all victims of an elaborate fraud perpetrated by people who wanted to destroy this company for their own financial gain. Harper Collins, with the help of my brother Rick, fabricated evidence and made false allegations to government agencies in an attempt to force me out of the company. But their scheme has backfired. The FBI has exposed their lies, and both Harper and Rick are now facing serious criminal charges. More importantly, the investigation has completely vindicated this company and everyone who works here. Sollace Corporation is stronger today than it was 2 weeks ago. We've proven that we can withstand attacks from people who would destroy us through lies and manipulation. We've shown that the truth will always prevail if we have the courage to fight for it. The applause was thunderous. Several employees came up afterward to express their support and relief that the nightmare was finally over. That evening, I sat in my office looking out at the city lights and reflecting on everything that had happened. 2 weeks ago, I'd thought my biggest problem was an unfaithful wife and an unqualified brother-in-law. I'd had no idea that I was actually facing a sophisticated conspiracy designed to destroy everything I'd built. But we'd survived. More than that, we'd won. Harper Collins was facing years in prison. Rick would have to live with the consequences of his betrayal. And Sollace Corporation was stronger than ever. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I worried it might be another threat from an unknown number. But this message was from Alara. Thank you for giving me the chance to do the right thing. I know it doesn't make up for everything, but I'm glad I could help expose Harper's lies. I typed back, it was the right thing to do. That's what matters. A few minutes later, David Chen called with an update on the legal proceedings. Harper's bail was denied, he said. The judge agreed that she poses a flight risk and a danger to the community. She'll remain in custody until trial. What about Rick? He made bail, but he's under house arrest and can't leave the state. His attorney is still trying to negotiate a plea deal. Any word on when the trials might begin? Probably 6 to 8 months. But given the strength of the evidence, I expect both cases will end in plea bargains rather than going to trial. What kind of sentences are they looking at? Harper could get 10 to 15 years if she's convicted on all counts. Rick might get 5 to 7 years, assuming he cooperates fully with the prosecution. After David hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the city one more time. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding what Harper and Rick had tried to destroy. I'd work to restore client confidence, repair relationships with investors, and strengthen the company's defenses against future attacks. But tonight, I was simply grateful that the truth had prevailed. In a world where lies often seem more powerful than facts, where manipulation can masquerade as justice, it was reassuring to know that persistence and integrity still mattered. Harper Collins had underestimated me from the beginning. She'd assumed that I would crumble under pressure, that I would accept her fabricated allegations rather than fight back. She'd been wrong about that, just as she'd been wrong about everything else. The final irony was that Harper's scheme had actually made me stronger. I'd learned who my real allies were, discovered reserves of determination I didn't know I possessed, and proven to myself and others that Sollace Corporation was built on a foundation solid enough to withstand any attack. As I turned off the lights and prepared to leave the office, I realized that this experience had taught me something important. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from avoiding conflict, but from facing it head-on with courage and conviction. Harper Collins had wanted to destroy me. Instead, she'd made me stronger than ever. And that, I thought as I walked to the elevator, was the sweetest victory of all. The doors closed, and I descended toward the lobby, leaving behind the battlefield where I'd fought for everything I'd built. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to prove that integrity and determination could overcome even the most sophisticated deceptions. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I could finally rest easy, knowing that the truth had won.